why I'm saved. That's why I'm saved.
Yeah.
Safe in His arms. He was, Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. He lets me rest in the meadow's grass, and He leads me beside the quiet stream. He restores my failing health, and He helps me to do what honors Him the most. That's why I'm saved. That's why I'm saved. That's why I'm saved. Oh, safe in His arms. So when the storm of life is raging, and the billows they roll on me, I'm glad, yeah, that He shall sing. That He shall come on, somebody praise Him right there. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
I am Helen Coleman, and you're watching The Greater Experience.
Greetings from Greater New Hope Baptist Church. I am glad to welcome you all to our live broadcast today. A warm welcome to you all as we gather as one from all over the world to pray, to worship, and sing.
Today, we celebrate the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The Greater New Hope Baptist Church presents a virtual MLK celebration that promises to be one to remember. Martin Luther King fought in the fight against the social injustices that plague our nation, and his life and legacy is being commemorated today. All across the world, we celebrate Dr. King's birthday. Sit back and enjoy this presentation. This is the day that the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. We are so excited that we have a virtual program today to present to you the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And we have some great individuals who will be participating in our program, and we will have a live discussion. So I need you to like this post. I need you to share this post. The Greater New Hope Baptist Church, we are committed to the fight for civil rights, human rights, and social justice. And we want to make sure that we are using this day as a day to uphold the legacy of that of Dr. King. Dr. King was a preacher. Dr. King was an alpha man. Dr. King was a community activist. He was a husband. He was a father. He was just like many of us that are watching this program today. And we want to utilize this online platform as a way to continue to spread the message. Even more so today, the need for us to be in this fight is prevalent in our nation. What we saw on January 6th allows us to know that we are not where we thought we were, and we still have a long ways to go. So I want you to like and share this post, find someone to put this on your big screen TV. We have some great presentations that's going to happen for you today. So we're going to go right into our program, and then we'll be right back.
Soon it will be done.
God's gonna set this world on fire. Yes, yes, yes. God's gonna set this world on fire one of these days. Hallelujah. God's gonna set this world on fire. God's gonna set this world on fire one of these days. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table. Yes, yes, yes. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. Hallelujah. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table. I'm gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. I'm gonna eat and never get hungry. Yes, yes, yes. I'm gonna eat and never get hungry one of these days. Hallelujah. I'm gonna eat and never get hungry. I'm gonna eat and never get hungry one of these days. I'm gonna drink and never get thirsty. Yes, yes, yes. I'm gonna drink and never get thirsty one of these days. Hallelujah. I'm gonna drink and never get thirsty. I'm gonna drink and never get thirsty one of these days. God's gonna set this world on fire.
And when you discover what you're going to be in life, set out to do it as if God Almighty called you at this particular moment in history. And just don't set out to do a good Negro job, but do a good job that anybody could do. Don't set out to be just a good Negro doctor, a good Negro lawyer, a good Negro school teacher, a good Negro preacher, a good Negro barber, a beautician, a good Negro skilled laborer. For if you set out to do that, you have already flunked your matriculation exam for entrance into the University of Integration. Set out to do a good job and do that job so well that the living, the dead, or the unborn couldn't do it any better. Falls your lot to be a street sweeper. Sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Leontine Price sings before the Metropolitan Opera. And sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. If you can't be a pine on the top of the hill, be a scrub in the valley. But be the best little scrub on the side of the rill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or you fail. Be the best of whatever you are. We already have some noble examples of black men and black women who demonstrated to us that human nature cannot be cataloged. They in their own lives have walked through long and desolate nights of oppression, and yet they've risen up and plunged against cloud-filled nights of affliction, new and blazing stars of inspiration. And so from an old slave cabin of Virginia's hills, Booker T. Washington rose up to be one of America's great leaders. He lit a torch in Alabama, and darkness fled in that setting. Yes, you should know this because it's in your own city. From a poverty-stricken area of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Marion Anderson rose up to be the world's greatest contralto, so that a Toscanini could say that a voice like this comes only once in a century. And Sibelius of Finland could say, my roof is too low for such a voice, from the red hills of Gordon County, Georgia. And the arms of a mother who could neither read nor write, Roland Hayes rose up to be one of the world's great singers and carried his melodious voice into the palaces and mansions of kings and queens. From crippling circumstances, there came a George Washington Carver to carve for himself an imperishable niche in the annals of science. There was a star in the diplomatic sky. And then came Ralph Bunce, the grandson of a slave preacher. And he reached up and grabbed it and allowed it to shine in his life with all of its scintillating beauty. There was a star in the athletic sky. And then came Jackie Robinson in his day and Willie Mays in his day with their powerful bats and their calm spirits. Then came Jesse Owens with his fleet and dashing feet. Then came Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali with their educated fists. All of them came to tell us that we can be somebody, and to justify the conviction of the poet, fleecy locks and black complexion cannot forfeit nature's claim. Skin may differ, but affection dwells in black and white the same. And if I were so tall as to reach the pole, or to grasp the ocean at a span, I must be measured by my soul. The mind is the standard of the man. Finally, in
Soon it will be done with the trouble of the world. Trouble of the world. Trouble of the world. Soon it will be done with the trouble of the world. Going home to live with God. No more weeping and wailing. No more weeping and wailing. No more weeping and wailing. Going home to live with God. I want to see my mother. I want to see my mother. I want to see my mother going home to live with God. Soon it will be done with the trouble of the world, trouble of this old world, trouble of the world. Soon it will be done with the trouble of the world, going home to live with God.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have a very serious conversation and discussion, if you will, about doing Dr. King, being relevant in the age of disinformation, in the age of so much unrest. Hi, my name is Carter Grant. I have the awesome privilege to serve as one of the deacons at Greater New Hope Baptist Church. In a second, we're going to talk about this amazing panel. Great men who have ideas, who are thinkers in their own right. And as I do that, I want to ask you to please share this broadcast with your friends and families because it's going to be a serious conversation, given the fact that we have witnessed right here in this country, probably for the first time, the rise of and for so long we were led to believe that we're on a trajectory for racial justice or equality, but what we're seeing begs to differ. So we're gonna go deeply into this conversation today. Again, thank you so much for joining us as we
Gotta love technology. Deacon Grant, we thank you so much for doing this. We just want to be able to hear you, sir.
So wait a minute, you haven't heard a word I said. Can you hear me now?
No, we can hear you now. You're
Oh.
live.
Well, I tell you, this is amazing with this technology
That's
here.
what happens when you're the producer and the moderator.
Yeah. So, again, I want to welcome this distinguished panel as we. So, let me back up. You didn't hear anything I said earlier, did you?
We heard the first intro, and then when we heard it was a great intro.
Okay. So I just want to again, and you know, the thing about technology that we love here is that it's fluid, so it happens, and we just have to move along with it. So I do appreciate your patience. Um, so briefly, let's go around the panel and maybe just talk briefly about yourself, so we can get into this serious conversation. We'll start with Dr. Craig. Can you hear me,
I
sir?
believe I'm all. I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
I can't. Dr. Okay, Dr. Caldwell. Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you.
Okay, so briefly, just talk about yourself, and then we'll continue with our discussion.
Certainly. So again, thank you all for having me on today to engage in this conversation. It is always an honor to be with Pastor McMichael and others as we have very important conversations, not just conversations, but call to actions around what does it mean to be service oriented? What does it mean to be justice oriented? And so I am thankful to be here with you all. Again, Jason Caldwell, I am serve as the senior consultant for Ubuntu Consulting here in Greensboro, North Carolina. I am also a full-time instructor in the Willie A. Deese College of Business and Economics at North Carolina A&T State University. And I serve on the pastoral staff at Powerhouse of Deliverance in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I have for the majority of my life felt like I have engaged in some sort of advocacy work and trying to bring a voice to those that oftentimes don't have their voice at the table. So I'm glad to be here with you all this afternoon.
Okay. Dr. Craig, can you hear us now? Are you back? No. Okay.
Can you hear me? I can hear you guys.
Yes.
We can hear you.
We can hear you now.
Here we go. So good afternoon, you guys. Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel discussion to discuss the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King during these trying times. I'm Dr. Craig Smith. I'm a CEO and founder of Fostering Success, Boys to Men. We educate, we mentor, we empower. Also the CEO and founder of C. Smith Funding. I'm currently in a full-time capacity, a higher education administrator. I'm working at Montgomery County Community College, where we're focusing on addressing all of the non-academic barriers that can serve as or pose themselves as a barrier to student persistence. I'm excited about this discussion to talk about Dr. King's legacy as it relates to having a love for all mankind, but taking it 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 steps forward and really talking about and discussing our respective call to action. So again, thank you for having me on the panel.
Okay. Dr. Pastor McMichael.
Pastor Lavelle McMichael, senior pastor of the Greater New Hope Baptist Church here in the city of High Point. I am a senior at Wake Forest School of Divinity and doing some local work and community activism, and have always participated in Martin Luther King celebrations across the United States in Arizona, Philadelphia, and now here in North Carolina, and really looking at an opportunity for this discussion to inform us and our community on how to take this call to action seriously and to embody the life and the legacy of Dr. King in a way that helps us to continue in the fight against the injustices that plague our nation as we fight for civil rights, human rights, and social justice. So I'm really excited to be a part of this discussion today. And thank you so much, Deacon Grant, for putting together this presentation. I've thoroughly enjoyed what I've seen so far. And I know there's so many more videos to come. So please stay tuned for this discussion, like and share it, and join us for the discussion.
Great. So let's just quickly get into this. We're talking about the doing Dr. King, and in this age of disinformation. So my question would be, disinformation has been around for a very long time. This is not new. What is so different about disinformation, fake news, now? What's so bad about it now, unlike any other time before?
So I'll start off. And one of the things about disinformation now in the world of mass media is the information travels much faster.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the disinformation is traveling at a faster pace and at a faster rate, it is allowing more people to have misinformation about how they are moving forward in their daily lives. And that's why we see the violence, we see the things that are happening across the nation that are contrary to the way we want the nation to go, because people are taking this disinformation, this fake news, and using the propaganda to really fuel their hatred towards different races and different colors, creeds, nationalities, religious affiliations. So I believe that that's one of the major things that's causing it, which is why it's important for us to use a platform like this to make sure that we're spreading the right information.
Dr. Craig, can you hear me? Dr. Caldwell, can you hear me? We're going to work this thing out eventually. Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting adjusted to, because there's all these different monitors. What's up top is delayed, and it's kind of throwing me off just a little bit.
Okay.
So in terms of just the media and where we are, this to Pastor McMichael's point, the immediacy of one's ability to communicate and to get the information out there, and the various platforms can work in one's favor or it can work against the situation. So that challenges where we are and our ability to make sure the right information is disseminated on a large scale to a larger body of people, which ultimately will have that impact and influence on the individuals that's listening to the information or receiving the information.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Caldwell, let me switch up a little bit. Do you think that what Pastor McMichael said about information traveling so much faster, could that be one of the reasons why disinformation in this time is so dangerous, primarily because it now forces you to not pay attention to real news or things that is relevant?
Oh, absolutely. And, and I think, since we're talking about Dr. King, I think it's important when we're talking about how things have been altered or misconstrued or manipulated to fit sort of the propaganda that's being pushed, we have to be very conscious of the fact that even in that, people are taking things that a Dr. King said or things that he believed and altering it to fit their alternate universe. And so for them, his theology and his belief around nonviolence and engagement, and how he believed that all people could come together regardless of nationalities, people have taken those moments and manipulated, and we find that now, particularly with this evangelical movement and sort of this white supremacy. But we also have to be mindful of the fact that those were the tenets by which white supremacy and other forms of indoctrination helped to suppress Black people, particularly in terms of taking things and manipulating its efficacy and its original intent to fit what you want it to be. And so, we would take this Christian notion of loving our neighbors and being engaging and use that as a form of dominance and suppression. And because things travel so fast now, it almost makes the hearer have to be more conscious about how they are hearing what is said. And we know that the word of God comes by faith and by hearing. And so when we're hearing these things, you have to be willing to make sure that you go back and understand where it originally came from, so that you're not further manipulated by this mass control of propaganda that is once again trying to dominate a society.
Yes. Interesting. So as we move along the program, we've got some other videos we want to share. These are members from the great church of Greater New Hope Baptist Church in High Point. So enjoy.
Every third Monday in January since 1986, Americans remember preacher and civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The day offers time to celebrate the achievements of the civil rights movement and to reflect and reaffirm the principles of equality, justice, and racial reconciliation for which King stood. We, the members of Greater New Hope Baptist High Point, join other congregations across the world to honor the legacy and also commit to the addressing of contemporary issues of injustice in our society.
Celebrating Martin Luther King, a man of great integrity, one who never waved or bent while fighting for the right of humanity. Regardless of the color of our skin and character, he led the way, along with others, still inspiring us today. Through courage, hope, and faith, stepping stones has been laid before us to follow for strength and dignity. For we have come a long way and continuing to go forward together so that all can be overcomers in unity.
Hello, my name is Carter Grant Jr., and I would just first want to start this video by saying I hope that everybody has a happy and enjoyable Martin Luther King Day. As well, I hope that people just take a time to reflect on the principles and the philosophies that the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fought for. And in one of his philosophies that he fought for in his infamous I Have a Dream speech is the philosophy of racial equality. This reminds me of a book that I finished reading just a few weeks back. And in this book, it's
Okay, so we're back. I'm going to go back and play that video again because we had some technical issues there. But so welcome back. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay. I notice here that it says that Dr. Craig is offline, but I see you, so that's not true.
Can't go by what you see.
Can't go by what I see. But well, that's a great segue. Because what I saw was what the experts would call an insurrection. I saw it with my own eyes in Washington, D.C., probably for the first time in modern history. A group of individuals felt empowered to take on the justice, the American governance. They felt like it was their right to police the keepers of our government. Do you think that Dr. King's argument about having a dream that one day we could be equals, we could all sit at the table of brotherly love, and we could all be treated not based on our skin color, but by the content of our character? What I saw was people were treated differently based on their skin color and not necessarily, obviously, their character. My question to you, panel, I'll start off with Dr. Cardwell first. My question is, given the progression of African Americans in this country, what about the insurrection that showed you that we have not progressed in terms of equal access, in terms of fairness in the way the government, the police more specifically, treat African Americans?
That's a great question. And, immediately my mind goes to the past year or more where we've had peaceful protests around the country, that where there was more police presence. They were heavily armed, in terms of the police, the National Guard, and others that were being there. And we see the event from um, last week where on our nation's capital, where it should have been one of the more secure places in the world at that moment, particularly because they were having a joint session of both senators and representatives. Our lawmakers are individuals that are in there representing our country, and we literally had a moment where people just bomb rushed the building. Some were basically let in the door. And that concept of, if you just take that concept of opening the door and the fact that it was so easy for those individuals who were primarily white to just walk through a door, makes you wonder and makes you always continue to question the fact that why is it so much easier for certain people to get in the door than others? And that was a perfect example of, white supremacy. It was a perfect example of privilege at its finest. That had that been a group of Black protesters or people of color, then the outcomes we already know when we look at Ferguson and other places would have been significantly different. So to answer the question, their equality is a concept that is best engaged when everybody at the table recognizes what they're bringing to the table. And when one group recognizes that they have more than the others, then there can't be equality. Dr. King said it best in his Drum Major Instinct when he talked about the new norm of greatness is not what you ascribe to or how you're recognized, but whether you're willing to be a servant. And if we're not willing to come together to figure out how we can serve everybody, then equality in America can't be fully realized.
Thank you. Dr. Craig, same question. You saw what we all saw.
Yes, I have many thoughts, but just to kind of keep on the lines of what the good brother said, what resonates with me is Dr. King's push for love for all mankind. And my shirt reflects fostering equality, and you have the Black and then you have the white. So there's a lot of silent things within what I'm bearing across my chest. But what I witnessed and what I took away, I took many things away, but what I saw was a manifestation of privilege on steroids, but privilege on a whole different level. Because typically when people are privileged, you have a privilege, you don't even recognize or realize that you actually are privileged. It's just something that you benefit from it. And because you've always had it, you don't even recognize that it's an actual thing. But those individuals walked and knew they walked in their privilege. They knew that they could go and do and not be harmed in ways in which we can't go and do and not be harmed. When you think back to the images, or when Black Lives Matter, when the the nonviolent protests took place down there, and how they were ready and they were armed and ready to do what was necessary to protect freedom and liberty at all costs. I'm waiting for the day in which we can really all benefit from the security of justice and really understanding and feeling that justice will be served and justice can be served regardless of if I'm Black or if I'm white. So what I saw was manifestation of white privilege on steroids.
Yeah, if you're just now joining us, we're talking about doing Dr. King in the age of disinformation, race, and injustice. Uh, Excellent panel. We've got my pastor, my friend, Dr. McMichael, Dr. Craig, and Dr. Cardwell. And we're in the middle of a discussion right now about what we all saw with our eyes. Now, Pastor McMichael, you wrote a book geared to boys and men. My son, like most dads' sons, saw what happened. What's the takeaway? What should I be telling him when he see like what Dr. Craig and Dr. Caldwell talked about, this blatant injustice, this display of privilege, like you said, on steroids? What do I tell him about his place in society? Yeah, are you optimistic, pessimistic? What say you?
So the first thing I teach my son is how to protect himself and how to stay safe in this world, because I want him to be able to live to maximize his full potential. And so my first conversations with both of my sons are around safety and protection. The next piece of that for me is empowering them and equipping them with the necessary tools to maximize their full potential, whether that's academically, athletically, conversationally with different groups of people. Because the more I empower them and equip them, they're able to grow to be who God has created them to be. And it's up to me as a parent, as a father, to really pave that way and to show that these acts of a lack of discipline in the name of privilege is not the correct way. And then paralleling that with the Black Lives Matter movement, my sons participated in the George Floyd March that we had here in the city of High Point, and they saw what a peaceful protest looks like from its planning stage to its execution. And so to be able for them to see that behind the scenes work and then see something that happens on national television out of privilege, and not many people get harmed, not many people get killed, not many people get arrested in comparison to Black Lives Matter and the different peaceful protests. It's really important for him to know that, be able to articulate it, and then be able to navigate through this society, because I'm not sure that it's going to change in my lifetime. It may change in his, but it's my duty as a father. And I would say to all of the fathers who are watching, all of the mothers, all of the congregations, that this is really a clarion call of action. We can no longer sit back and watch the television. We have to make our own TV so that we can get our history at the forefront, so that we can make sure that service is what we're doing and not talking. And then we need to rear our children in such a way that allows them to become leaders, so that as they grow, and regardless if they are playing on the basketball court, the football field, deliberating in the courtroom, if they're on the judge stand, if they're police officers, firefighters, school teachers, they need to be exemplifying the characteristics that we have been taught and trained down through the years, so that we can lead from the front, like Dr. King did, and make sure that our words are heard, and that they are not just heard in the eloquence of how we're able to articulate them, but in the action that comes behind them.
Cool. Yeah, Dr. Craig, I want to go back to what you said earlier, and it just led me to ask you what's the role of protest in the 21st century?
Well, it depends on who's protesting. It depends on who's protesting. Historically, so it just depends on who's protesting. I mean, I believe the role of a protest is to, organize. To Pastor's point, organize. We're not just going out there and running wild and trying to make a point, and really causing more harm to ourselves and our community. But the goal is to organize and to show strength in numbers, to execute our voice, but then to come back and execute. Like we need to do a little more than just walk and talk, and destroy oftentimes just to make a point. Okay, the point is made. Now what? What are we doing as parents to ensure that we're raising sons and daughters, kings and queens, to grow up and rightfully take a place on the walls or seat in Congress or in the courtroom to defend people, or leading the school district to ensure, as a superintendent, to ensure that equality exists? What are we doing at a macro level as well as a micro level to ensure that after this protest occurs and happens, that we can actually move to action and see some change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not my phone.
I think that might have been my phone there. I apologize for that. So, Dr. Caldwell, let's go back to you for a second. And Dr. McMichael talked about how he would, talk to his sons about the protests, what they're seeing, the takeaway. How would you explain to boys, young men? Dr. Craig said that we should work hard to have a seat at the table, so to speak, where we could influence policies. Um, what's the role of the black leader given the climate that we're in right now? I mean, you get a seat at the table, but what exactly do you see the role, the influence of the black leader is in this context?
That's a great question. And, I look at it from a couple of different perspectives. One is that, I think in this current climate, in this current contemporary context, a black leader has to be authentically themselves and unafraid to be authentically themselves. I think, media, society has tried to transform blackness to be subservient, to be less than, to feel as though you are not the same as your counterparts, particularly when we look at Black executives and Black leaders in various capacities. And so for that reason, again, it goes back to the development of the American culture, in that, Black men especially, and women, were made to feel less than. And so that mentality has transcended generations to the point where we sometimes don't always feel okay to speak truth to power because we want to be politically correct, or we want to make sure that we are appeasing all sides of the room. But I have learned and have become okay with the fact that I am who I am. I am a Black male. I am a influencer. I'm a leader. I'm an advocate. I am a father. I'm a husband. And I make sure that I'm amplifying all those roles wherever I'm at, to make sure that, one, you're not going to use this space to minimize me because of the color of my skin, and being okay with speaking and being and sharing into context that you might not normally be able to get into. And I found that by being authentically myself and not allowing the context to minimize me, that it has elevated my platform. It has elevated the table that I'm now sitting at. And so And then once you get to the table, being able to help open the door for other people to get there, and not being afraid to share and to speak truthfully. And, you know, to be quite honest, I've been in meetings, and before it was always this timid approach to, well, what do you think we need to do in regards to working with our, because I'm in higher ed like Dr. Craig, working with our Black students. Well, let's not, first of all, let's not minimize it and try to downplay it. And let's be okay with saying that we're going to focus on working with this specific population. And I think right now, as people are more willing to be authentic, that we're able to have greater access to different tables.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. We're gonna go.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
Because I think in addition to us positioning ourselves and, rearing our children in a way in which that we're creating opportunities for us to open doors, we also need to build our own tables and create our own houses with our own doors so that we can walk through those as well. So I think there's power, and there's a lot to be said for us, being able to have a seat at the table. Because one, if for nothing else, is strategy. Now you're here, you can actually see, the level of thought behind what's going on, how people, and the intentionality of the things that's actually being done. So with that being said, we also need to create our own opportunities as well, so that just in case doors are not open for us, we won't be left behind and left without.
Mm-hmm.
Final point to that whole conversation. I've been doing some discussions with a Caucasian church around a book entitled White Rage. And Carol Anderson does a great job showing that from slavery to now, the progression of Black people in general raises up these insurrections. And so, I mean, for a point of reading, it's really important for us to know that every time Black people begin to progress, there is white rage that happens that is then disguised by what the world would call Black rage. So they see rioting and looting and violence from us, but really that is a result of a fire that has been kindled within Black people. So when slavery ended, right, when you see that slavery ends and we're now free, then you see the rise of the Ku Klux Klan and these secret societies that then hooded themselves, which now they don't need to, because privilege says you don't have to hood yourself. We're going to get you off anyway. Because that's why the Capitol was not protected, because they are protected. So you can't protect the Capitol and then protect whiteness.
Yeah.
So it's important for us to understand that what we're seeing now is white rage. And now we know that protesting, we know that looting, we know that violence, we know that rioting is not just a Black thing, that it is a white thing. What the difference is what we're protesting and fighting for. We're fighting for equality and equity. They're fighting to keep us out of the picture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but like Dr. Craig just said, should we be talking about a separate table? Is that part of the conversation? Okay.
And that separate table needs to have access to the financial streams. That table needs to have access to educational equity, not equality, but equity, because we can have the same access to the information, but if we don't have the tools to keep us engaged and connected, having access is not enough. Being able to function in the access is where really we get disenfranchised, because we'll open up communities and say anybody can live here, but then raise taxes. We can give anybody an opportunity to come to a school, but then build it an hour and a half away. So because there's a lack of transportation, there's a lack of access, even though you have access.
Yeah. Good point. We're going to do some more videos, and when we come back, and I'm going to ask you gentlemen not to be so polite. In the next segment, jump in, push back, so we can have a heated discussion, okay?
All right.
So and I also want to say too that as you see me do this back and forth thing. I'm actually doing some producing work here, so I'm not ignoring anyone or not being interested. It's just that I'm doing other production work. Okay, just a disclaimer.
You're doing a great job. Thank you so much, Deacon Grant, for always making sure that these programs go on without a hitch. And I think our viewing audience is enjoying what's being presented today. So thank you for taking the time to not only moderate this discussion, but show us the impact that King has had on this nation and all of us individually.
Okay, appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Carter Grant Jr., and I would just first want to start this video by saying I hope that everybody has a happy and enjoyable Martin Luther King Day. As well, I hope that people just take a time to reflect on the principles and the philosophies that the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fought for. And in one of his philosophies that he fought for in his infamous I Have a Dream speech is the philosophy of racial equality. This reminds me of a book that I finished reading just a few weeks back. And in this book, it's a book by Ernest Gaines, who was an African-American author. And the book was titled A Lesson Before Dying. And in this book, he had a character who was titled Superintendent. And the superintendent was an overweight white male who went to these poor African-American schools in the state of Louisiana, and he inspected, their bodily hygiene, whether they were fit or whether they were fat and lazy, as well as their teeth. He checked their mouths as well, and just to see if they understand just basic arithmetic, science, geography, and stuff like that. So with that being said, he eventually told the teacher, Grant Wiggins, that the kids had bad teeth, they had overall bad hygiene, and that they were all just basically fat and lazy. This is ironic because the superintendent was a lazy, overweight male himself, and he could barely get into his car. So just, that little tidbit just kind of reminds me of the situation that's going on in America today, of how there are white Americans who are storming and, rioting, and going into the U.S. Capitol and just basically just, destroying it, and just causing a whole lot of ruckus. But it seems as if there's not a lot of repercussions and consequences going on with them and their violent protesting. But whenever, us African Americans, we do peaceful protesting in the streets, for our Black Lives Matter and to fight for and advocate for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of racial equality. And it seems as if we're the one always taking the bullets, going to jail, and being beaten down mentally, physically, and sometimes even spiritually. So in this video, I just want to encourage us to be able to just reflect on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. philosophy of racial equality. And I just want to encourage all of us to just stay educated, especially as an African American community, because there'll be a lot of times where people who are not of color will try to, just get over you, take advantage of you, or just mentally, physically, or even spiritually beat you down. So I just encourage everybody in the African American community to just stay educated, so that way we can continue to fight for our seat at the table of racial equality, and continue to pursue the late great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s philosophy of racial equality. I hope that everybody has a blessed day. I love you guys, and take care.
Martin Luther King had a dream. His dream was not only for his wife and children, but our nation. Every year, we celebrate his birthday as a national holiday to remember this iconic legend and his contribution to the fight for human rights, civil rights, and social justice. A celebration is not enough. I encourage you to embody his legacy and live a life that serves humanity and fights against the injustices that plague our nation. As Christians, we know that we were created in the image and likeness of God. God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble, and he declares the end from the beginning. All of us have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, no matter our color, creed, nationality, religion, or economic status. I service my community by helping seniors. I serve my church by leading prayer and Sunday school. I serve my family by being an example. And I serve the world by being an honorable citizen. This is clearly the ministry of Jesus, the ministry of reconciliation. And he has called us to reconcile the world back to himself. It is time for you to take the challenge of not merely existing, but of living your best life. Pick up your cross and honor the legacy of this great man, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. My name is Yvonne Weaver, and on behalf of the Greater New Hope Baptist Church, we say happy birthday, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. May your legacy continue to live in all of us.
I am Logan McMichael, and today I will be reciting a poem entitled, I Have a Dream. I have a dream, said Martin Luther King. We're going to make that dream come true. Let freedom ring, said Martin Luther King. It's up to me and you. It's not the color of your hair or the color of your skin. It doesn't matter what you wear. It's the character within. I have a dream, said Martin Luther King. We're going to make that dream come true. Let freedom ring, said Martin Luther King. It's up to me and you.
I am Lavelle McMichael Jr., and today I wanted to say happy birthday to Dr. King. Your legacy and your fight for social justice, human rights, and civil rights lives on today. I dedicate this poem to you, mother to son. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor bare. But all the time I've been a climbing and reaching landings and turning corners and going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you set down on the steps because you find it's kinda hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey, for I's still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Langston Hughes.
Colossians 3:13-14 says, bear ye with one another and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance with someone, forgive them as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them together in the perfect unity. Understand that now is the time for us to love one another, because hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And if we wish to see a change in this world, then we cannot react as the world does. But we must love those who hate us and bless those who curse us. We can't just talk king, we must do king. We must be willing to work with those who don't look like us. We must be willing to engage in conversations with people who don't agree with everything we believe in. We must be willing to take a stand for justice. Now is the time for us to do something, to join together and let our voices be heard, knowing that we won't stop until justice runs down as waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. And if we do these things, if we stop talking king and start doing king, then I believe one day we'll be able to stand and say, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last.
Hi, Greater New Hope. My name is Brianna Coleman, and I'm from the Coleman family. and I wanted to read a poem dedicated to Dr. Martin Luther King. When Martin was a little boy, it made him sad and lonely to see the parks and the pools and the schools with the signs that said white only. He knew he had to change the world, but had to do it right. And that meant working peacefully. No fist would win this fight. So Martin grew and studied too, and came to speak his mind. He led the march for equal rights for all humankind. Dr. King did change the world, as hard as that may seem, but with an open heart and mind and heart, you too can live that dream.
Dr. Martin Luther King's life was threatened, his family was threatened. Dr. King received multiple bomb threats, and most of his letters were written from jail cells. To endure such hardship, you have to look beyond your comforts towards something bigger, and you have to believe that the bigger picture is possible. You and I care enough about the church and its potential impact on the world to endure inevitable hardship. So, as we remember Dr. King, let's look to someone greater. Let's look to God.
There was a little boy who had a dream that became a man that chased his dream until outside a hotel in Tennessee his blood did stream. And you can hear part of a nation scream. Although you may not know him as Michael, but to the whole world he was a king, leading a revolt just as the same from the man which his father took and changed both of their names. Although it is often shortened to M. For Martin Luther King Jr., we often celebrate this day. But we can't forget the sacrifice of Mama King, Sr., Miss Alberta, Yolanda, Dexter, Bernice, or the third. And remember his legacy. To forget their sacrifice would be so absurd. The greatest commemoration to this legacy will be to continue to pass on this dream in a way to set such a blaze that the fatherless cycle will become just a phase. Then to see generations no longer taken for granted the things in which about this man raved and ran it. At this point, was his death all in vanity? Did we really arrive with the 8 years of Barack? Or did we become complacent with 8 to suffer for 4 as a dream lingered and to almost exist no more?
About Martin Luther King.
Right.
Well, Martin Luther King is a great man, was a great man, and he came to Jamaica in the early 60s and held a meeting at the Mona Lecture Hall. That means at the University of the West Indies. And he was loved in Jamaica. That when he died, everyone was sad. And they hold a lot of grief for him because he was doing a good job. And then at the mother church, our church, the East Queen Street Baptist Church, and the other Baptist churches held services on his behalf when he died because they trusted him and they knew that he was doing great things for the people of his country and for other countries because it circles around, just like our forefather Paul Bogle did. And it helps to remember the goodness of those men. And then we need men like Martin Luther King today to stand up and stand out. We need leaders that are true to their cause and to God. So we just thank God for him and what he has done and achieved and the legacy that he left behind, and hope that young men coming up will follow on to finish the job, because he was great and even do greater things. And we saw that in our pastor too. He's heading for that direction, and we are proud of him. So let us continue to celebrate Martin Luther King's legacy and life. We thank God for him.
Okay, we're back with our discussion panel. If you're just now joining us, we're talking about doing king in the age of injustice, in the age of or I want to call it fake news, um, and in the age of race. And on the panel, we have Dr. Cardwell, Dr. Craig, Dr. McMichael, who is also my pastor and my friend. So let's get back into this conversation. And I guess this next segment, I want to focus on injustice. Um, Everyone is crying out about injustice. Um, how do we know that we're living in injustice? Does that
Let me
make
start
any
off.
sense? Oh, Dr.
It
Craig raised. Okay, who wants to go first?
Let Pastor go first. He'll be a lot more
No,
diplomatic.
all I was gonna say is when you say fake news, that's a term that your president uses, and I think he uses it to discredit the news that is informing us about things that are right. So we're talking specifically about fake news. We're talking about those that promote the injustices, that support the policies that then disenfranchise people. So I agree that it's fake news, and it's what people are using to actually run with. You know, people may say, "Oh, I voted for this person not because I actually agree with them, but I like their policies." But if you like their racist policies, that's a problem for me more than the actual individual. So I think it's really important that we dig deeper into what injustices look like. We shouldn't have to rewrite a bill. The bill should be corrected based on the fact that it was written with injustices in mind, that it was exclusionary. You know, people want to talk about the Constitution in this great document. However, if we don't go back and correct the injustices that was written in that, then what are we actually standing for? So yeah. Go ahead, Dr. Smith.
Well, the young man that had the glasses on, I think is Jaquez. He said something that just stood out and resonated in my soul. I just looked over there at my gun, and then I looked over there at my gun license. Stop talking king and start doing king. I don't know about that, y'all. Like, and you know, this ain't the 60s. Yeah, I'm a little challenged in that area. Because at the end of the day, you're not firebombing my house. You're not going to keep threatening me. You're not putting your hands on me. This ain't that. So I think where we are now, and we're in a different time frame, and things are just manifesting differently. I was on someone's Facebook page, and the young lady was going through some things with the pastor of the church, or there was a disagreement because it came out that the pastor was a Trump supporter, right? And then a brother actually chimed in and, said that he voted for Trump. So I just kind of asked, if you don't mind sharing with me why you voted for Trump. And to Pastor McMichael's point, the gentleman said, all things aside, he voted for Trump based off of his policies. But if you can't look past your racist actions to see the policies, because if your actions are predicated beyond your racism, then your policy, you can talk all the lip service you want. I'm going to do this, that, and the third to secure buy-in from people. But if your actions speak something totally different or speak something contrary, then I'm going to have to go based off of how you're acting versus what you're saying that you're going to do. Because if you're acting like a racist and you're talking and you're speaking like a racist, safe assumption is that when you get into a seat of power, you're going to probably not have the best intentions for all people. I'll say that. But yeah, let's stop talking king and start doing king. I don't know about that. King is about nonviolence.
Yeah.
And I'm not and I'm not saying this to say that I'm a violent person. However, that foolishness we witnessed on the Capitol, I'm not going for that. I'm not going for that. Because people's homes were destroyed and vandalized. And as they walked and did what they did, it wasn't a good situation at all.
Yeah. Yeah, so with this idea of, and we're gonna try to get Dr. Caldwell in on this as well. With this idea of injustice, um, we were all led to believe, whether consciously or subconsciously, that black is inferior. What I mean by that is, and you guys are educators as well, so you might agree with this. When someone say they're looking for a good school or a new school or a better school, it's often not a HBCU. It's often in a better neighborhood, predominantly black neighborhoods. That's the code word for a better school would be out of that neighborhood. If you want to move to a better neighborhood, it probably is not going to be a black neighborhood. If everything that we're taught, and again, we're talking about disinformation and the media. If you're just now tuning in, I want to remind you that on this panel, we're talking about the the when we're led to believe that everything that's right or everything that is good is absence of black. What are we teaching? We're talking about social media here for a second. In this context, what are we teaching our younger folks about the value of blackness when everything seems to be better if it's not black? Dr. Caldwell.
You know,
Go ahead, Dr. Caldwell.
Go ahead, Dr. Smith.
what are you teaching at home now becomes the question, because if we're waiting for the school system to educate our children, we're doing our children a disservice. Equally as such, if we're waiting for society or the school system to teach our children our history, then we're doing them a disservice as well.
I think beyond that, I teach my children that black is beautiful, that black is one of the reasons why our nation has progressed. I send them to black dentists, lawyers, black judges, black construction workers, black plumbers. I mean, the reality is a lot of the inventions that we enjoy the luxuries of, black people invented them. So I believe that history in the home front, like Dr. Smith said, is very important. Empowering our children to be authentically themselves, to not compromise that, to make other people feel comfortable. I teach my boys to never shrink in the presence of anyone, but to always be authentically themselves in a respectable manner. Because a lot of times, to your point, Deacon Grant, we think that better is the absence of blackness, and that's incorrect. It's really important that we understand our role in society and in these United States of America in a way that allows us to not just to reach for things that white people approve of, but that are just right. And so that's why it's important for us to not get educated and move out of our community, for us to not get educated and then never support our black churches, our black institutions, right? Black fraternities and sororities. It's really important that we take our money and stop putting it in white communities, but put it back into our communities, back into our churches, back into our HBCUs, because the more we take away from our community, then we further disenfranchise it. So for me, it's about supporting black businesses. You look at these T-shirts that we're wearing today. Who was the manufacturer of those T-shirts? Did a black person design it? So those are the things that are important for us to know, so that we're uplifting our community as we're fighting for these injustices that are plaguing our nation.
Yeah, I want to push back a little bit. And I purposefully use a clip with Dr. King talking about, if you're going to do something, do it your best. What about the stigma that, we're not doing our best work? You might find the best dentist happens to be white. I'm not saying that's the case, but there's again, fake news, false news, this false narrative that we're not doing good work. So this idea, and I think my son touched on it, that we're led to believe that we're shiftless, lazy. I mean, although we're so progressive, um, are we doing our best work? Because this label still is attached to us. And from your vantage point, it's not about going to a black dentist or a white dentist, but the best dentist. What do you say? Are we doing our best work?
I want to say I think we are, and we have to be. When that statement is suggested, one, we have to be very conscious of historical precedents by which that arrived.
Mhm.
In meaning, there has always been, since the inception of America, the development of the American culture, for Black and Indigenous people, this culture of less thanness. And so when we recognize that there has always been this oppressive mentality that has been prescribed to us, then we in some ways um, um, sort of conceptualize that we feel as though we're not as good as our counterparts. And so the argument then becomes, well, can we find the best dentist, regardless if they're Black or white? But that again comes from this perpetuation of when we were brought here in chains and in bondage, we were given the ability to create. And so we built houses, we took care of children, we helped raise families, we were the chefs, we were catering services before they even knew what a catering service was. And for that, there has always been this level of excellence. But because there was this culture of less thanness that was dominant in the culture, there was always this feeling of my ability is not as good as the white person because the white person is free and I'm not. And so now we're living in a society where we place value on a person's gifting and abilities, when in essence, if we remove the concept of and I think going back to Dr. King again, his drum major instincts is probably one of the things that I go to a lot when I'm looking at this. He says, in paraphrasing around, if in order to be great, and to the problem with America is that it wants to be great and it wants to ascribe greatness to certain things. But if we really examine ourselves and look at it from not being great, but how we are being of service to others, then that in of itself is the greatness that we should be ascribing to.
Mhm.
And we look at it from that viewpoint, that it's not a matter of who's better than, but my ability is just as good as, regardless if I'm Black or white, then we can help promote our culture and our society to the viewpoint of recognizing that Black is good. Black businesses are good. They're thriving. Black doctors, Black lawyers, and elevate them. Then will we be able to get to the point where we're dismantling this systemic culture of feeling less than and not equal and not equal to.
Mhm.
It,
Yeah,
it is something that we perpetuate against ourselves because we
Absolutely.
brought into the propaganda that people have told us we're less than. Then we treat ourselves and our businesses. This is why I don't fool with my people, right? When we really
Absolutely.
that should be why we fool with them. We'll put our kids in a quote unquote better school, and we'll go to all of the PTA meetings there. We'll raise money for the booster-thon there. But then we'll go to a Black school, and then we won't show up for the PTA meeting. We won't raise any money, and then we disenfranchise that. So it's like the same energy that we will put into something that we feel is greater. The same greatness is within our community. We just have to support it, pull it out of them, and then not leave them because something goes wrong. Something goes wrong at Walmart, but we don't stop shopping at Walmart. We order a shirt from a white company and it's too small or too big, and we send it back and we ask for another one. We get it from our people, and it's like, see, this is why I'll never order from us. So we have to look at our behavior and how we perpetuate that, so that we can, instead of pushing our own community to the side, really support our community. And I just encourage everybody that's watching to stop making excuses for why you don't support your community. And that's a part of the call to action. A part of the call to action is to support our businesses, to support our schools, to teach your children the value of who they are. Because when we don't do that, then propaganda wins. When we don't do that, then the narrative that has been taught to us, like slavery was a nice job, is dismantled. So we have to deconstruct the social constructions that have made us to feel inferior. I'm listening to my wife when she's teaching and she has the kids recite, I am a great writer, I am a great reader, you know, and the more we teach our children that at a young age, as they grow up, they will embody who they are and not feel less than. So we have to put the fire under ourselves to not support whiteness in that respect, to support our own selves and what's in us.
Yeah, good.
I think it has a lot to do, if I can add to that, with us being committed to the commitment and responsible for the responsibility of our, again, I always look at things from a micro level and a macro level. We have direct influence over who we have direct influence over. And oftentimes that's our children or those individuals in our household. So within our household, if we could do all those things, Pastor McMichael actually spoke about, now we're creating layers and layers and layers that will eventually get to that macro level. An individual, if he do all of these things with LJ and with Logan, and then those other individuals that he have influence over, now you're creating a whole generation of powerhouses that's going out here and that's moving and shaking. But you hear the dedication in this. He's committed to the commitment and responsible to responsibility to ensure his sons become who it is they are predestined by God to become. You can't get tired. And now we're seeing a lot of parents that are tired and don't have the energy to put into their children.
Yeah. So, and that was my point. So here I am working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet. How do I compete with social media? How do I compete with TikTok when you're talking about self-hate and how I see myself in society?
I use those platforms to give positive expression. And I think that the competition is not with the platform. My competition is with myself. And that's what I teach my children, that you're not competing with somebody's views or followers. You're competing at being the best you. Because when you're the best you, like you said, Deacon Grant, the best dentist, when you're the best doctor, then all of that other stuff is just hype. It's just entertainment. But at the end of the day, you want to know that you've maximized your potential. And that's one of the things I write about in my book, maximizing potential from childhood to manhood, from childhood to womanhood, from immaturity to maturity, that at some point I begin to say, I need to do better today than I did yesterday. And that's my best. That when I surpass the number of steps on my watch from yesterday, then I've maximized that potential. And then tomorrow I have to work harder. And so what's happening is, as a society, we do not set our own bar high because we don't want to have to outdo ourselves. But that's where the competition is. My competition is not against other pastors and other churches. My competition is not against other husbands and other fathers. My competition is with myself. When Lavelle becomes the best Lavelle he can be, then nobody else can match that.
Yeah, I agree. So, which brings me to my next point. And I agree. But the idea, and again, if you guys are just now tuning in, we're actually talking about it's and on the panel we've got my pastor, my friend, Dr. McMichael, Dr. Craig, and Dr. Cardwell. Great distinguished voices, thinkers in their own right. And if you've been here the entire time, you would agree with that as well. So we're talking again about the injustice in social media. When we see so many young boys, African American men, and in some cases girls, being abused on TV, at some point, I would agree. I would suggest that the psychiatrists and sociologists might suggest that that becomes normal. That becomes normalized. Are we at that point now? Are we numb to black violence, Dr. Craig?
I had a hard reality, probably 2003, about 2003. I took a job at Strawberry Mansion High School in the heart of North Philadelphia. That first week, it was interesting. I had left higher ed to go back to what I considered to be the trenches. And it was a comprehensive high school. You guys get a chance, you can look it up on YouTube, Strawberry Mansion High School, Diane Sawyer, and that can give you a visual depiction of the chaos in which, I worked every day, and I was challenged with, educating, mentoring, and empowering these young people in this despairing situation to see something beyond what they saw every day. And during that first week, this young man, there was a shootout outside the school, and a young man, died. And I literally watched him take his last breath out there in the street. And when I was out there, of course, all of the other young people were just kind of trying to come and take a look. And, I got up from, being by the side of the young man and was encouraging the students not to look. And they were just looking and was like, damn, and just shrugged it off. And I'm sitting here, have an old master's in clinical psychology. I'm just stunned and traumatized by what I'm witnessing. But when I looked and saw how so many of those young people were so desensitized to what I was shocked beyond, it let me know that we have gotten to a point, and we talking back 2003. So those kids grew up to become desensitized adults. So what does that look like now that they're adults? How does that show up? How does that trauma, that desensitization show up in the way that they show up at work, the way that they show up in family, the way that they parent their children, the way that they engage or interact with each other, let alone engage or interact with authority. So yeah, I do believe we've gotten to a point where the shock and the sting of violence is so far gone, which is why folk can honestly say that stop talking king and start doing king. People ain't trying to hear that. They've been conditioned to be on go. And who to say if that's a good thing or a bad thing outside of it just being a thing in our reality.
Yeah. And entertainment prepares us so that we are desensitized. So when we see these things happen on television and programs and series, then when they actually hit in real life, for example, the way the coronavirus was dealt with in the beginning, like it was something that will go away, was almost like it was the Outbreak movie from 1985. Like, no, this is something that's actually real that we're going to actually have to live through. And it's not an hour-and-a-half movie. It's going to be something that alters our lives, alters the things that we are used to doing in a way that's different. And when we look at that and we put that to violence, when we look at that and we put that to the injustices, when we see these things perpetuated on programs like All in the Family or the Jeffersons, the blatant racism between black and whites, right? That those interactions, then we're desensitized to the name calling. We're desensitized to how blacks and whites engage. And so it becomes normalized and we become insensitive to it. So it's very important that we reprogram ourselves, and social media, Deacon Grant, to your point, it further perpetuates this liberty of expression that can also be a detriment to how we engage with one another. So it's important that many people say, oh, I don't like Facebook. Facebook is the devil. Well, when it's used for these type of purposes, for virtual worship, for showing your family's progression or vacation, then it's used for the right purposes. But when we use it to make a clarion call of an insurrection, then its platform has been abused. And so it's important that we as a community use our platforms not to not to promote hate or hating on one another, but to really uplift our community so that we're not desensitized to the things that are happening. You know, I see so many posts on Facebook about death until it's like, you know, we have to be careful what we post, how we post it, because we don't want to become insensitive.
Hmm. Yeah. Dr. Caldwell, in same conversation. But the twist is black on black crime real? We talk about, we're still talking about disinformation or misinformation or fake news. Is black on black violence real? And if it is real, a real thing, do you think that there is any value in black lives among the younger black culture?
Well, I think to the latter part of what you said, there absolutely has to be value placed on recognizing that we have had communities impacted because of violence that happen to be black on black. I think, when we change the narrative of the conversation to make it seem like blacks are killing blacks at faster rates than others, then it minimizes the impact that it's having on the greater community. And we as those social change agents and those that are engaged and are willing, and I think it goes to what Pastor McMichael and Dr. Smith has said, you know, how are we doing the work? How are we having conversations with not only our sons and our daughters, but their friends, the communities that we live in? How are we helping to elevate the need to strengthen the Black community and not allow the media to downplay it by saying that the Black community is whittling away because the Black community is killing itself? And we know and we have to be actively engaged and working to figure out how do we dismantle the system that perpetuates that we're killing ourselves, and being conscious of that. And I look at someone like a James Baldwin, who in his book The Fire Next Time talked about this whole concept of tokenism, and the fact that white America is comfortable with letting blacks sort of whittle themselves away. But again, we have to dismay that notion. We have to always be mindful of historical precedents. We have to be aware of contemporary context, and I think that conversation always gets muddled away with the fact that when we look across America, white Americans have done more damage in terms of large scale violence when we look at school shootings and other things. But that narrative is not portrayed the same when we talk about Black on Black crime. And that's the conversation that I think we need to continue to have.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add to that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm not gonna say that. There's no comparison. One Black on Black crime is one too many, right? One Black on Black murder is just one too many. And outside of how the narrative is created, because we could talk about how when there's a crime that takes place, it's obvious and it's clear from a media depiction perception or media depiction that the person is a person of color, because they typically will state the color. I can always tell when the person is more than likely not a person of color, because they kind of dance around the race, and they certain words and terminology that they use would allude to the fact that it is a person of color or is not a person of color. But I'm worried about our black on black crime in our community, and the fact that we just have, and I mean, where I live, I have access to it. I have some of the apps and some features by way of these social media platforms that alerts you or alerts me when, you know, things are happening within a respective community. And it's alarming, and it's just heartening, and it's a fact. I don't care if they're not painting a picture of how many white folk have killed white folk. It doesn't deter, or it doesn't change the fact that we have too much, and one is too much for me. Two is definitely too much. Too much black on black crime, especially in the city of Philadelphia where I reside, but just across the country in general. It's too much. One is too many. One is too many.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to how we parent, how we rear our children, how we teach our children values. We have to go back to the principles of how we were raised. And I think a lot of times, as each generation is born, there is a lack of parenting, there is a lack of grandparenting, there is a lack of a village that was surrounding young people, and we have to really surround our young people. And it needs to be something that's happening with all of our young people, because what happens is, if I raise my children this way and you raise your children that way and somebody else raises their children that way, when they all come together, there's an exchange of ideas, and the dominant one becomes the one that's adopted. So we have to, as a community and collectively, go back to rearing and raising our children in a way that teaches them self-respect, respect for others, respect for the house of God, respect for our communities. We have to take care of what's given to us, take that which is that's ours. So it's important that it goes for me, it goes back to parenting.
Mhm. You know, again, if you're just now tuning in, we've got Dr. Craig, Dr. Cardwell, Pastor Lavelle McMichael, who is also my friend and my pastor. Um, the idea that I think we all made reference to it at some point today about having a seat at the table, if you will. Um, One thing that I do notice is that um, language is important. Language means a lot, and having a seat at the table is fine. But let's talk about defining things. So, because I like history, I'd say this: the the power of language. And if I could just give you a story, so I could make a point. Um, People were getting sick with peanuts, but peanut was not the same industry as the dairy industry. People were getting sick from drinking milk. But when you control language and you're in a position and you recognize the value and what happens when you mislabel something, you go into this overdrive mode. You find a way to preserve what it is that you think is valuable. So here's what the milk industry did. They said, we can't call this thing milk allergy. We just say lactose intolerant. That's beautiful language, right? It's just you're lactose intolerant. Because people won't associate that with an allergy, something negative. Um, Black on black crime seems to be negative because no one says white on white crime. Pastor McMichael, define white on white crime in the context of language and the importance of labeling something. Can you explain what white on white crime is in reference to black on black crime?
Our capital insurrection.
Reminds me of, me and my son like to share these TikTok things, and there's one that says like, say you're black without saying you're black.
Watermelon.
Yeah. So yeah, we're getting ready to wrap up now. Great discussion, but finally, guys, before I leave, Dr. King, much like you guys were an alpha man, would he be proud of the alphas today?
I believe he would be proud of the alphas. First of all, servants of all, transcending all. Even with the recent Georgia elections, I believe that alpha men are leading from the front. We're in the trenches. We're serving the community, and it is my hope as an alpha man to always lead from the front, to always be innovative and creative, and to use my platform as a way to promote godliness and how we as individuals and communities can not only support ourselves but support others. So it's important to me that I embody those principles of manly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind, and taking seriously the principles of our fraternity, so that as individuals look at us, they can say, "There goes an alpha man."
Mhm. Dr. Craig or Dr. Cardwell?
Yeah, I believe, Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated, develops leaders, promotes brotherhood and academic excellence while providing service and advocacy to our community. So we've been doing just that for 100 and where we at 15, 16, 17, 18, for a long time, since 1906. So I do believe Dr. King would be pleased with the work that the brothers have done. Do I think that we can do more? We all can do more. So onward and upward.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I agree with my two brothers, Deacon Grant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think by looking at the scope of alphas that are in different positions, I mean, the historical moment with Brother Warnock, now Senator Ralph Warnock in Georgia. I think absolutely Dr. King would be happy with the fraternity and its members. But I think, to Dr. Smith's point, there's certainly more that we all can continue to do. And we became members of this fraternity not because of the one thing that we could do, but the many things that we can and will do to continue to provide service and advocacy.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for joining this panel, and thank you for viewing and commenting on this discussion. This is a discussion that's been going on for a long time, and obviously, it will continue. Uh, we're doing King, and in order to do King, I think we and the panel will agree we have to be conscious, we have to be mindful, and but more importantly, I think we have to take action, and whatever action looks like for you, you just have to keep moving. You have to take action. So again, thank you all for joining. We're getting ready to go now. Dr. Craig, Dr. Carwell, Pastor McMichael, thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you, sir, for having us.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
It's Pastor Lavelle McMichael of the Greater New Hope Baptist Church in the city of High Point, and I wanted to come on and personally invite you to our Wednesday night Wisdom Bible study. Every Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. on all social media platforms, we are taking a deeper dive into Sunday's message so that we can give you the answers that you've been looking for, get you the direction that you desire, and so that you can see the manifestation of God's presence and blessings in your life. So I need you to join me this Wednesday and every Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. for our virtual Wednesday night Bible study. God bless.
I'm Delrose Wellington, and thank you for watching today's broadcast.